What's going on, guys? Nate here, and today I'd like to talk about my preferred Elder Scrolls 6. Throughout dozens of videos and discussions within the comment sections, I've mentioned a lot of features that I'd like Bethesda to include or improve upon for the next installment in the franchise. So I decided why not consolidate all of those ideas, as well as introduce some other ones into a single video. So today I'd like to talk about my optimal version of the Elder Scrolls 6, and what I would like it to strive for. To start off, I want to discuss factions. For the most part, I was rather fond of how they were implemented in Skyrim. There's quite a handful of them, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself in each that I played. Though for the next installment, I'd like to see the factions' actions be given a larger consequence throughout the world. In the Elder Scrolls V, you could literally assassinate the Emperor when you were part of the Dark Brotherhood, and absolutely nothing changes in the world around you. Now, I'm not calling for massive economic inflation, political instability, or any of the other consequences of Brexit or whatnot, but seeing some citizens mourning or celebrating would have been nice. I'd also appreciate more conflict between joinable factions. This was a highlight of the Civil War for myself, as I fell in love with approaching the characters of the Imperials and the Stormcloaks with different perspectives. Going back and doing quests and battles with the opposing faction were mostly felt different, and they rarely felt like a total reskin, but instead getting to look through the eyes of the other side. Another similar instance to this, though on a much smaller scale, was getting to massacre the entire Dark Brotherhood if you played your cards right upon first meeting Astrid. Getting to play in the other side's shoes just made me feel more in control and appreciate the quest lines that much more because of it. Perhaps the Elder Scrolls 6 could have its own version similar to the Civil War of Skyrim, where two joinable factions are going at it, perhaps the Empire and the Thalmor, in a war that changes the political landscape of the province you're in. And don't make it fair either. Playing as the Stormcloaks, you were the underdog of Skyrim's Civil War, but rarely did you ever really feel like it. You were never hopelessly outmatched or had to fight any harder. Every battle was in your favor and was very easy to win if you could mash the stick hard enough. It would have been a much more unique experience if the factions weren't fighting on equal footing. In a hypothetical fight between the Imperials and the Thalmor, give the Empire an uphill battle, one that requires more effort and interference on behalf of the player to win. Breaking away from factions, another big change I'd like to see within the Elder Scrolls is an improvement to the combat system. Combat within the TES series has always largely been determined by whether or not you have high enough stats that are capable of clicking the trigger button enough times in order to defeat an enemy. Skill rarely plays a factor, and I think it would be good if Bethesda were to do something to change that. Strangely, I think this is one of the areas Fallout 4 handled very well, or at least far better than its predecessors. A reworking of the VAT system combined with an overhaul to power armor, which admittedly didn't make combat that much more skill-based, but added a level of variation within it that I believe was sufficient. How could the Elder Scrolls improve its combat system? Well, if Bethesda wants to, they have some options. If they desire to go all out on melee, they could look to the rather sophisticated star system we've seen recently, used in For Honor and KCD, which allows the player to block, parry, counter, dodge, and all that good stuff, and use that system for inspiration. Though this may or may not be the direction Bethesda really wants to take, so in that case, perhaps a few skills and maybe a perk rebalancing could be sufficient. Additionally, I'd like to see mounted combat improved in some capacity. I've never really enjoyed the monotony of being forced to dismount my horse to engage in a fight that I wanted a realistic chance of winning. Damage buffs, or even some sort of large stagger/damage increase when a horse charges into an NPC, could also be a good hypothetical solution. Furthermore, now looking to location, geographic diversity is a huge one for me. Skyrim included lush, dense forests, snow-capped mountains, and these vast plains all throughout its landscape. And hopefully the next Elder Scrolls game will be able to see a similar level of variation within its environment. Now, this would in all likelihood mean that Bethesda would have to avoid setting their game in a province like Argonia, which largely only has one sort of landscape, which is swamp and marsh. Hammerfell, however, seems to be rather appealing. It boasts mountain ranges, forests, deserts, grasslands, and beaches, as does High Rock. Both of these would work well in a potential setting, in my opinion. That's not to say a setting that doesn't meet these geographical qualifications, as you could call them, couldn't be done well if Bethesda approaches it right. I just don't want to grow bored with the environment. Speaking of NPCs, and my god, what a transition, despite larger cities and settlements, I would like Bethesda to continue their practice of creating as many unique named NPCs as possible. One of the cooler aspects of Skyrim that I believe often gets overlooked in light of everything else within their settlements is how almost every single NPC in a city will have a name, a signed house, and live a radiant life. If I see someone selling me vegetables at a random Whiterun market, I have the ability to follow that character home and come across other NPCs it has a relationship with. They felt alive. And when I play other RPGs that lack this, I really do miss it. Now, understandably, if we're looking for Bethesda to build massive cities on a much grander scale, then such a task becomes more difficult. In Skyrim, there's only a few dozen NPCs to track per settlement and city, but depending on the scale of TES 6, that number would likely have to increase exponentially. So I'm not asking for every single NPC to be unique and live out radiant lives, but hopefully a good percentage will, and Bethesda won't lose sight of that. And with that concludes my personal biggest hopes and wishes for The Elder Scrolls 6. Now, I'm sure there's some other things others may want to add in, so please feel encouraged to do so in the comment section down below. Also, first person to comment first gets a high five. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, a like rating is always very much appreciated, and I hope to see you all in my next video. Peace out, everybody.